Captain Park Jin-woo knew he was about to die. The research station shook violently around him as something massive tore through the outer hull. Sparks flew from broken control panels, and the lights flickered on and off. He could hear his crew screaming in the corridors behind him, but there was nowhere to run. Through the viewport, he watched in horror as the thing that had destroyed his world continued its work. It wasn't a ship or an army. It was something far worse. Millions of metallic creatures, each the size of a building, swarmed across the surface of Kepler 442b like hungry insects. They didn't just attack the cities or the people, they ate everything. The mountains disappeared first, then the oceans turned to steam, and finally even the rocks and soil vanished into their endless mouths. Park's hands shook as he activated the emergency transmitter. Blood ran down his forehead from where falling debris had cut him. He had maybe 30 seconds before the station's life support failed completely. "This is Captain Park Jin-woo of the Terran Research Division," he spoke into the camera, his voice steady, despite the chaos around him. "If anyone receives this message, you need to know what happened here. The Kepler 442 system is gone, not just the colony, the entire system. These things, whatever they are, they don't want our technology or our resources. They want everything. They're eating the planets down to their cores. They're even harvesting energy from the star itself." Another explosion rocked the station, and Park grabbed onto his desk to keep from falling. They moved together like a hive mind, millions of them, all perfectly coordinated. Our defenses were useless. They adapted to every weapon we used within. Minutes, they're heading toward the inner systems now. Warn everyone, tell them to run, tell them to hide. Tell them that humanity needs to know what's coming. The transmission cut out as the station finally broke apart. 3 days later, Lieutenant Commander Lee So-young sat in the communication center at Coalition headquarters on Centauri Prime. She was the night shift operator, used to receiving routine reports about trade disputes and minor territorial conflicts. When Park's message came through the long-range relays, she nearly dropped her coffee cup. Lee played the recording 3 times before she was sure she understood what she was seeing. Her training told her to follow protocol and file the report with the morning briefing, but something in Park's eyes made her act differently. She copied the transmission to a secure drive and ran through the corridors to the emergency council chambers. Ambassador Kang Min-ho was humanity's voice among the Coalition Council, but most days he felt more like humanity's punching bag. The other species tolerated humans as junior members, barely worth listening to. When Lee burst into his quarters at 3 in the morning, he was ready to be angry until he saw her face. "Sir, you need to see this right now," she said, her voice shaking. They watched Park's final message together in silence. When it ended, Kang was already reaching for his formal robes. "Call an emergency session, now." The Coalition Council chamber was an impressive sight, with representatives from 47 different species arranged in a great circle. Each delegation had evolved on different worlds under different conditions, creating a fantastic variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. Some breathed methane, others lived in water tanks, and a few existed as pure energy contained in special suits. Ambassador Kang stood at the human podium, which was embarrassingly small compared to the massive platforms of the elder species. He played Park's message for the assembled council and waited for their response. The Valkyrian council leader, a creature that looked like a cross between an octopus and a tree, waved his tentacles dismissively. "Frontier hysteria," he announced in his translation device's metallic voice. "Humans always exaggerate threats. They see monsters in every shadow." Other council members murmured agreement. The Zephyrians, who resembled tall, crystalline birds, chittered with what sounded like laughter. The aquatic hydrons bubbled with amusement in their water tanks. "This is clearly a fabrication," declared the Valkyrian leader. "Humans desire attention and importance in our alliance. They create dramatic stories to make themselves seem valuable." Kang felt his face burn with anger, but he kept his voice calm. 17 systems have gone dark in the past 3 days. No communications, no trade signals, nothing. How do you explain that? "Equipment failure. Solar flares. Pirates, perhaps," the Valkyrian replied. "There are many simple explanations that don't require believing in planet-eating monsters." The debate continued for hours. Some council members suggested sending a small investigation team, but others argued that even that was unnecessary. The Stellar Cartographers Union reported that long-range sensors showed no unusual activity in the affected systems, which only supported the skeptics' position. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, the darkness spread. Colony after colony simply vanished, their final transmissions cut short by static. The few automated probe ships that survived long enough to send data back showed the same terrifying pattern. Entire worlds stripped down to nothing, solar systems, drained of energy, and always those swarming metallic shapes moving on to the next target. Lee worked frantically in the communication center, trying to piece together reports from the expanding dead zone. Each new system that went silent added to her growing sense of dread. She sent updates to Ambassador Kang every few hours, but the Council remained paralyzed by debate and disbelief. On the morning of the fourth day, as the Council prepared for another session of arguments and delays, Lee received a transmission that made her blood run cold. It was from Captain Oh Seung-ho, commanding officer of the mining station at Proxima 7. "This is Captain Oh, we can see them coming. Dear God, there are so many of them. They're like a cloud that covers the stars. Send help, send anyone. Don't. Let them reach the core worlds." That transmission was the last one received from the Proxima system. Ambassador Kang Min-ho sat in his small quarters on Centauri Prime, watching the holographic display that showed the expanding dead zone. 23 star systems had gone silent now. The red markers on his map looked like a disease spreading across the galaxy's outer rim. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he couldn't bring himself to move. The Coalition Council had finally agreed to send a fact-finding mission. A single science vessel with a crew of 12. They would take 2 weeks to reach the affected area, assuming they survived the journey. Meanwhile, entire civilizations were being erased from existence. Kang pulled up the latest refugee reports on his personal tablet. The numbers were staggering. Billions of people had simply vanished without a trace. No escape pods, no distress beacons, no survivors. Whatever was consuming these worlds left nothing behind but empty space and dead stars. His hands shook as he reached for the quantum communicator, hidden in his desk drawer. Using it would violate every diplomatic protocol in the Coalition Charter. He could lose his position, face criminal charges, or even be expelled from the Alliance entirely. But as he looked at those red markers spreading across the map like spilled blood, he realized he didn't care about protocols anymore. The device hummed to life with a soft blue glow. Quantum communication was expensive and heavily regulated, but it was also instantaneous across any distance. Earth would receive his message in seconds, not weeks. "Priority Alpha transmission to Earth Defense Command," Kang spoke into the device, his voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral Kim, this is Kang. We have a Code Black scenario. I repeat, Code Black. The Outer Rim is under attack by an unknown force. Civilian populations are being systematically eliminated. Coalition response is inadequate. Request immediate assistance." He hesitated for a moment before adding, "The Council doesn't believe us. They think we're lying for attention. But I've seen the reports, Admiral. I've seen what's left of those worlds. There's nothing left. We need help, and we need it now." Kang sent the transmission and then sat back in his chair, staring at the communicator. He had just committed treason against the coalition government. In 6 hours, he would either be a hero or a prisoner. Admiral Kim Jae-min was reviewing fleet assignments in her office on Lunar Station when Kang's message arrived. She had known the ambassador since their academy days, and she had never heard that kind of fear in his voice before. Kim read the intelligence reports that came with the transmission, and her blood ran cold. She didn't hesitate. Kim activated the emergency broadcast system that connected every human military base, civilian defense force, and commercial fleet in human space. Her message was simple and direct. "This is Admiral Kim Jae-min, Earth Defense Command. We have received credible intelligence of a massive hostile force attacking civilian populations in the Outer Rim. All available vessels are ordered to converge on Grid Sector 7 Alpha immediately. This is not a drill. This is not a coalition operation. This is a human response to a human emergency." She paused, thinking about the politics of what she was about to say next. "To all civilian vessels, participation is voluntary but requested. We don't know what we're facing out there, but we know our people are dying. Earth Command will provide tactical support and coordination. Kim out." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, every military base in human space was buzzing with activity. Ships that hadn't left dock in years were being rushed through emergency repairs. Cargo haulers were being fitted with whatever weapons could be found. Even luxury yachts were being loaded with medical supplies and emergency equipment. Captain Yoon Da-eun commanded the cargo vessel New Horizon, a beat-up freight hauler that normally carried agricultural supplies between Earth and the farming colonies. When Admiral Kim's message reached her ship, she was delivering rice and vegetables to Mars Station. "Change of plans," she announced to her crew over the intercom. "We're going to war." Her chief engineer, a gruff man named Park Tae-ho, looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Captain, we're a cargo ship. We don't even have proper weapons." "Then, we'll make some," Yoon replied. "Get on the comm and find me every volunteer on this station who knows how to fight. We leave in 4 hours." Word spread quickly through Mars Station's civilian population. Within 3 hours, Yoon's cargo holds were packed with volunteers. Former military personnel, police officers, security guards, and even ordinary citizens who simply couldn't stand the thought of doing nothing while people died. Engineer Choi Hyun-sik spent those same 3 hours welding plasma cutters and mining equipment onto the ship's hull, creating makeshift weapons that might actually work. In a fight, similar scenes played out across human space. On Europa Station, civilian pilot Nam Soo-jin loaded her personal shuttle with medical supplies and emergency rations. She had never fired a weapon in her life, but she knew how to fly, and that might be enough to save lives. The merchant vessel Lucky Star was supposed to deliver entertainment systems to the outer colonies. Instead, Captain Lee Dong-wook filled his cargo holds with volunteer fighters and emergency supplies. His ship wasn't fast or well-armed, but it could carry a lot of people, and sometimes that was what mattered most. On Earth itself, retired Admiral Hwang Soo-jin came out of retirement to command a hastily assembled fleet of museum ships and training vessels. These ancient warships hadn't seen combat in decades, but they were still functional, and they were all humanity had available. The most surprising response came from the civilian population. Families emptied their savings accounts to buy supplies. For the volunteer fleets, factories that normally produce consumer goods switched to making emergency rations and basic weapons. Children drew pictures and wrote letters for the crews heading to the Outer Rim, not really understanding what was happening, but knowing that brave people were going to help others. Within 6 hours of Admiral Kim's broadcast, over 3,000 human vessels were moving toward the Outer Rim. It was the largest mobilization in human history, but it wasn't organized by any government or military command. It was simply humanity responding to a cry for help in the only way they knew how. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humans. They might argue among themselves about politics and resources and territory, but when innocent people were in danger, those differences disappeared completely. And when humanity stopped asking for permission and started taking action, the results could shake the foundations of the universe itself. Dr. Song Yoon-ji had spent her entire career studying alien life forms, but nothing had prepared her for what she saw through the viewscreen of her research vessel. The planet Narration 5 had been a thriving world just 2 days ago, home to 12 million people across 7 major cities. Now it looked like someone had taken a giant bite out of it. Research. "Log day 47, she whispered into her handheld recorder, her voice shaking. "We've arrived at Narration 5 and I can barely believe what I'm seeing. The planet's surface is completely gone. Not destroyed, not bombed, but actually consumed. There are thousands of these metallic creatures covering what's left of the world. Through her telescope, Song could see individual organisms that were larger than most skyscrapers. They moved across the planet's surface like mechanical ants, but each one was the size of a city block. Their bodies seemed to be made of a dark, shifting metal that reflected no light. As she watched, one of them opened what looked like a mouth and simply swallowed a mountain whole. They're not just taking resources, Song continued her recording. They're converting everything into more of themselves. I can see new organisms being born from the material they consume. The population centers are completely gone. The oceans have been drained and processed. Even the atmosphere is getting thinner as they consume the gases. Her science officer, Lieutenant Cho Min-young, pointed at the sensor readings with a trembling finger. "Doctor, look at this. They're working with perfect coordination. Every single organism knows exactly where every other organism is and what it's doing. It's like they share a single mind." Song studied the patterns of movement on the planet below. The creatures never bumped into each other, never worked on the same area twice, and never wasted any motion. It was the most efficient operation she had ever witnessed, and it was absolutely terrifying. They're not random, she realized. This isn't chaotic destruction. They have a plan. They're systematically stripping the planet layer by layer, starting with the most energy-rich materials and working their way down to the core. The communication system crackled to life, interrupting her observations. Research Vessel Galileo. This is Coalition Battlecruiser Triumph. We are engaging the hostile forces. Maintain safe distance and prepare to record combat data. Song watched through her view screen as 3 massive Coalition warships approached the planet. These were the pride of the Galactic Fleet, vessels that had maintained peace for over 1,000 years. Each ship was over 2 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack a moon in half. The battlecruiser Triumph fired first, launching a barrage of plasma torpedoes that lit up the darkness of space. The weapons struck several of the creatures on the planet's surface, and for a moment, Song felt a surge of hope. But then she watched in horror as the damaged creatures simply absorbed the energy from the weapons and used it to repair themselves. "Impossible," whispered Cho. "They're feeding off our attacks." The creatures on the planet suddenly stopped their feeding and looked up at the Coalition ships. In perfect unison, thousands of them launched themselves into space. They moved without any visible propulsion system, simply willing themselves upward through the planet's fading atmosphere. "Coalition ships, you need to retreat immediately," Song broadcast on the emergency frequency. "They're adapting to your weapons in real time," but it was too late. The mechanical swarm reached the Coalition fleet within minutes. Song watched through her telescope as individual creatures, each one larger than a fighter jet, swarmed over. The battleships like metallic parasites. They tore through the hulls with claws that seemed to cut through the strongest alloys like paper. The Coalition ships tried to fight back, but every weapon they used was quickly analyzed and countered by the swarm. Laser cannons were absorbed and redirected. Missile systems were hacked and turned against their own ships. Even the ship's defensive shields were somehow converted into weapons that the creatures used against them. Within 20 minutes, all 3 Coalition vessels were destroyed, not just damaged or disabled, but completely consumed. The creatures had eaten the ships and added their materials to their own growing mass. Captain Oh Seung-ho arrived at Narration 5 3 hours later, commanding a small rescue fleet of human vessels. He had hoped to evacuate survivors from the mining colonies on the planet's moons, but what he found made his blood run cold. "This is Captain Oh reporting to Earth Command." He spoke into his communicator as he stared at the readings on his sensors. "Narration 5 is gone. Not just the surface, but the entire planet. These things have consumed everything down to the core. The star itself is showing signs of energy drain." His tactical officer, Commander Bae Soo-min, pulled up holographic displays, showing the battle debris. "Sir, we're detecting fragments from 3 Coalition battle cruisers. These were Triumph-class vessels, the most advanced ships in the galaxy. They lasted less than half an hour against these things." Oh studied the tactical data from the battle, trying to understand what had happened. The Coalition had used every standard military tactic, and all of them had failed completely. The creatures had adapted to each attack within minutes, turning the fleet's own weapons against them. They learn too fast, Oh realized. Every time we use a weapon or a tactic, they figure out how to counter it almost instantly. It's like fighting an enemy that gets stronger every time you hit them. He opened a channel to all human vessels in the area. "This is Captain O to all human forces. We're dealing with something completely new here. These creatures don't just want to conquer territory or steal resources. They want to erase everything we've ever built and replace it with themselves. Standard military tactics are useless against them." As if to prove his point, one of the creatures suddenly appeared on his view screen. It had somehow detected his ship from across the system and was now accelerating toward them at impossible speeds. O could see that it was already analyzing his ship's design and capabilities. All ships, emergency retreat. O ordered. We need to get back to human space and warn everyone what we're really facing. As his small fleet jumped to hyperspace, O took one last look at what had once been Narration 5. The star was noticeably dimmer than it had been just hours before. The creatures were feeding on stellar energy itself, growing stronger with every passing moment. Earth Command, this is Captain O, he transmitted as his ship fled toward human space. We're not just fighting an invasion, we're fighting extinction. These things won't stop until they've consumed everything in the galaxy, every world, every star, every trace of life. And they're getting stronger every time they feed, Captain. Yun's cargo ship, New Horizon, dropped out of hyperspace first, followed by a stream of vessels that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard rather than a battle zone. Her converted freighter was covered in welded-on weapon mounts that sparked and smoked with each shot. Behind her came mining ships with industrial drilling equipment pointed forward like spears, research vessels bristling with improvised missile, launchers, and even a luxury cruise liner that had been turned into a mobile hospital. The coalition observers watching from their command ships couldn't believe what they were seeing. Admiral Thekmol of the Velkarian fleet stared at his tactical display in confusion. What are they doing? There's no formation, no battle plan, no coordination. They're flying in complete chaos, but Captain Yun knew exactly what she was doing. All ships, this is Yun. Remember what Captain O told us. These things adapt to patterns, so we don't give them any patterns to adapt to. Everyone pick your own target and attack however you want. Keep moving, keep changing, and don't let them figure out what you're doing. The first wave of human ships hit the mechanical swarm like a tornado. Unlike the precise military formations that the creatures had learned to counter, the humans attacked from every possible angle at once. Some ships dove straight down from above, others came in spinning sideways, and a cargo hauler actually flew backwards while firing its rear-mounted weapons. Sergeant Major Park Gunwoo coordinated the madness from his command post aboard the passenger liner Golden Dream. The ship's former dance hall had been converted into a tactical center where Park tracked the battle on dozens of mismatched screens. Alpha Team, I see some big ones chewing on that asteroid, Park called out over the radio. Hit their processing. Nodes with whatever you've got. Beta Team, those antenna-looking things on their backs seem important. Try to knock those off. Charlie Team, there's a refugee convoy trapped on that space station. Get them out of there before these things notice them. Park paused to watch a mining ship ram one of the creatures head-on, its industrial drill punching through the alien armor like it was made of tin foil. Everyone else, just keep making noise and keep them confused. Don't let them think. Don't let them adapt. Just keep hitting them with stuff they've never seen before. The machines began taking serious damage for the first time since their invasion started. They tried to analyze the human attack patterns, but there weren't any patterns to analyze. Every human ship fought differently, used different weapons, and attacked from different angles. Just when the creatures thought they understood one tactic, the humans would switch to something completely different. Engineer Choi Hyun-sik had spent the journey to the battle zone converting his ship's mining equipment into weapons. Now he watched with satisfaction as his plasma cutter sliced through creature after creature. They're built to handle military weapons, he called out to his crew. But nobody ever shot them with a mining laser before. The most creative attacks came from completely unexpected sources. Captain Nam Soo-jin, flying her tiny personal shuttle, discovered that the creature's sensors couldn't track anything smaller than a fighter jet. She loaded her cargo bay with homemade explosives and flew right up to the biggest creature she could find, dropping her bombs directly onto its head before zipping away too fast for it to respond. A converted garbage hauler commanded by Captain Lee Dong-wook found that the creatures were confused by his ship's waste processing systems. The aliens tried to analyze the strange energy signatures, giving Lee enough time to ram his ship's garbage compactor into their communication arrays. Lieutenant. Commander Kim Young-soo observed the battle from his position aboard a coalition monitoring vessel. He had served as a military attaché with human forces before, but he had never seen anything like this. "They're using mining charges as torpedoes," he reported to his superiors, his voice filled with amazement. "That cargo ship just ejected its entire load of shipping containers and is using them as armor. And that research vessel is firing scientific probes that have been rigged with explosives." The machines tried desperately to adapt to the human tactics, but every time they adjusted their defenses, the humans came up with something new. A hospital ship started using its medical lasers as weapons. A food transport began launching frozen meals like cannonballs. Even a space tug designed for moving asteroids became deadly when its pilot realized he could use his towing cables to tie the creatures together. Captain Park Hyun-soo commanded a construction vessel that normally built space stations. In the middle of the battle, he had a brilliant idea. "If these things eat metal," he announced to his crew, "let's give them something that'll give them indigestion." He began launching construction materials that had been rigged with explosives, watching as the creatures automatically consumed them and then exploded from the inside. The tide of battle slowly began to turn. The mechanical swarm, which had easily destroyed every military force sent against them, found themselves struggling against an enemy that refused to follow any rules. Every time they thought they had figured out a human tactic, another human would try something completely different. Dr. Song Yunji, still observing from her research vessel, watched the battle with fascination. "They're not winning through superior firepower," she noted in her log. "They're winning through pure creativity. The machines can't adapt to chaos because chaos isn't something you can systematically counter." For the first time since the invasion began, the mechanical creatures started to retreat from a battle. They pulled back from the human fleet, trying to regroup and analyze what had happened. But even their retreat was met with human unpredictability, as several cargo ships started chasing them while playing loud music and firing fireworks. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had brought something new to the war. Not better technology or superior numbers, but something far more dangerous: the ability to think outside every box that had ever been built. Every day brought more human ships to the battle zone, but these weren't organized military reinforcements. They were individual captains and crews who had heard about the fight and decided to join in. Captain Lim Hyo-jin arrived in her medical vessel Mercy's Hand, which had been completely transformed during the 3-day journey from Earth. "We stripped out half the patient wards," she explained to the other human commanders over the radio. "Now we've got a full repair bay that can fix battle damage in hours instead of days. Any ship that needs help, just dock with us and we'll get you back in the fight." Working alongside Lim was engineer Young Woo Young, a mining specialist who had never seen combat before this war started. During the journey to the front lines, he had figured out how to modify asteroid mining equipment into devastating anti-ship weapons. "The mining charges we use to break up asteroids work great against these metal creatures," he discovered. "We just need to get close enough to attach them." What caught the attention of every alien observer was how the humans worked together, without anyone giving them orders. Captain Shinbora commanded a small destroyer that had been built for patrol duties, not major battles. When her ship found itself surrounded by 6 of the mechanical creatures, she didn't call for help or try to retreat. She simply announced on the open channel, "This is Shin, I'm in trouble." Before she had even finished speaking, 3 civilian ships were already changing course to help her. A cargo hauler, a passenger liner, and even a small research vessel all moved to assist Shin's destroyer. They didn't ask for permission, didn't wait for orders, and didn't hesitate even though they were all outgunned. "I've never seen anything like it," reported Valkyrian observer Thekmol to his superiors. "These humans have no central command telling them what to do, but they fight like a single organism. They share everything freely: weapons, fuel, repair supplies, tactical information, even their lives. When one human ship is in danger, every other human in the entire sector responds automatically." The cargo hauler reached Shin's position first. Captain Yu Sung-min immediately began ramming the creatures attacking her destroyer, using his ship's heavy hull as a weapon. "Don't worry about us," he called out to Shin. "Just keep fighting. We've got your back." The passenger liner, Star Princess, arrived next, commanded by Captain Park Sun-young. Her ship wasn't designed for combat, but she had loaded the cargo bays with volunteers carrying personal weapons. "We're launching boarding parties," she announced. "If these things want to fight hand to hand, we'll give them a fight they won't forget." The research vessel contributed by using its scientific equipment to jam the creature's communication signals. Dr. Moon Jae-hyun had discovered that the creatures coordinated through quantum frequencies, and his ship's sensors could disrupt those signals when used at maximum power. Together, the four ships managed to destroy the creatures attacking Shin's destroyer, but the cost was high. The cargo hauler had been badly damaged, and the research vessel was leaking atmosphere. Without being asked, other human ships immediately moved in to help with repairs and medical aid. "They're like a pack of wolves," observed Coalition Tactical Analyst Veltar. "But wolves that share resources and coordinate without hierarchy. Every human ship acts as both predator and protector for every other human ship." This pack mentality was demonstrated most dramatically during the rescue operation at Mining Station Delta 7. The station held 3,000 civilian refugees from destroyed worlds, but it was surrounded by a processing hub where dozens of the mechanical creatures were converting asteroids into more soldiers. Pilot Officer Kwon Min-seok was flying a damaged fighter that had already lost its weapon systems and was running on backup power. When he saw the refugee situation, he made a decision that shocked even his fellow humans. "This is Kwon," he announced on the open channel. "I'm going to ram the processing hub. That should give you enough time to get the civilians out." "Kwon, don't do it," called out Commander Bae Soo-min, who was coordinating the rescue operation. "We can find another way." "No time," Kwon replied. "Those people need to get out now, and this is the only way to buy you that time. Take care of my family." Kwon's fighter slammed into the center of the processing hub at full speed. The explosion destroyed the hub and temporarily disrupted the creature's coordination, giving the rescue ships exactly the opening they needed. Commander Bae used those precious minutes to evacuate all 3,000 refugees. As the rescue convoy jumped to hyperspace, she whispered a promise. "We won't forget what you did, Kwon. None of us will." The mechanical creatures found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Every other species they had fought operated through clear command structures and logical tactics. But humans seemed to operate on pure emotion and instinct, making decisions that defied all military logic, but somehow worked perfectly. When the creatures destroyed a human ship, instead of demoralizing the other humans, it seemed to make them fight even harder. When they damaged a human vessel, other humans would immediately share their own resources to keep it fighting. When they captured human territory, the humans would sacrifice anything to get it back. "They don't fight for territory or resources," reported Machine Intelligence Unit 7742 to its collective. "They fight for each other. This creates unpredictable behavioral patterns that cannot be systematically countered." Dr. Song Yoonji, still observing the battles from her research vessel, began to understand what made humans different. "Other species fight as individuals working together," she noted in her personal log, "but humans fight as a family. They would rather die than let their family members down. The machines can analyze tactics and weapons, but they can't analyze love." The mechanical swarm began to experience something they had never felt before: uncertainty. For the first time since their creation, they encountered an enemy that got stronger when hurt, more determined when defeated, and more creative when cornered. They were learning that fighting humanity wasn't just about facing better weapons or smarter tactics. They were fighting something far more dangerous than military might. They were fighting the human heart, and that was something no machine could ever truly understand or defeat. Chief Engineer Han Ye-jin had always been the kind of person who took apart electronics just to see how they worked. Now, in the cargo bay of her converted research vessel, she was taking apart pieces of alien technology, while explosions lit up the space around her ship. Her makeshift laboratory was a chaotic mess of cables, computer screens, and fragments of destroyed mechanical creatures. "Pass me that quantum analyzer," she called out to technician Ryu Junho, who was carefully examining a piece of creature, armor under a microscope. "I think I'm starting to understand how these things talk to each other." Ryu had been working for 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. He was a maintenance technician by training, used to fixing air recyclers and food processors, not analyzing alien war machines. But like many humans in the fleet, he had discovered skills he never knew he had. "This metal isn't just armor," Ryu observed, pointing at the microscopic structure. "It's like a computer and a radio and a weapon all built into one material. No wonder they can coordinate so perfectly." Han connected her computers to a captured communication device and watched patterns of data flow across her screens. "Look at this, Ryu. They send thousands of messages every second, but they're all following the same basic pattern. It's like they're all reading from the same instruction manual." She opened a secure channel to Dr. Moon Jae-hyun, who was analyzing similar equipment aboard his research vessel 3 sectors away. "Moon, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Their communication system is incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly rigid. Every message follows exact protocols. There's no room for creativity or randomness." Dr. Moon's excited voice crackled through the communicator. "Yes, it's like they've built the perfect telephone system, but they can only say specific words, in a specific order. If we could introduce random noise into their network, we might be able to confuse them." Han's eyes lit up as she understood the implications. "Better than that. If we can figure out how to speak their language, we might be able to give them false orders. Make them think their own commanders are telling them to do something else." Over the next few hours, Han and her team worked frantically to decode the creature's communication protocols. They were helped by engineers aboard dozens of other human ships, each contributing pieces of the puzzle. Captain Kim Tae-young sent data from his mining vessel about how the creatures coordinated their feeding patterns. Lieutenant Commander Park So-young shared recordings of machine communications she had intercepted during battles. The breakthrough came when Specialist Park Yu-jin, a computer programmer aboard a cargo hauler, realized that the creature's communication system had a fatal flaw. "They trust everything that comes through their network," she announced during a fleet-wide conference call. "They don't have any security because they've never needed it. They've never fought an enemy that could hack their systems." Within hours, human engineers across the battle zone were building devices based on Han's discoveries. What had started as a desperate attempt to understand the enemy had become a powerful new weapon. Sergeant Lee Dong-min was among the first to test the new technology. He commanded a squadron of modified mining drones that were normally used to collect ore from asteroids. Now each drone carried an electromagnetic pulse bomb and one of Han's communication disruptors. "This is Lee to all mining crews," he announced as his drones approached a cluster of mechanical creatures. "We're going to try something new. Instead of just blowing them up, we're going to make them blow each other up." Lee's drones flew into the middle of the creature formation and began broadcasting false commands using the aliens' own communication protocols. The creatures received what they thought were orders from their central command, telling them that the other creatures around them had been infected by a virus and needed to be destroyed immediately. The result was spectacular. The mechanical creatures, which had always worked in perfect harmony, suddenly turned on each other. They began fighting with the same efficiency they had used against human forces, but now they were fighting themselves. Captain Im Soo-hyun commanded a squadron of fighter jets that had been equipped with the new viral communication disruptors. Her pilots were former civilian cargo hauler crews who had volunteered for combat duty, and they approached the mission with typical human creativity. "Remember, people," Im announced to her squadron, "we're not just shooting them anymore. We're lying to them. Make them think their friends are enemies. Make them think they're getting new orders. Make them think whatever you want. Just keep them confused." Pilot Kim Do-young was the first to score a hit with the new weapon. He flew his fighter close to a group of creatures and began broadcasting a signal that convinced them their processing hub was actually a human ship in disguise. The creatures immediately attacked their own facility, destroying it completely. "This is incredible," reported pilot Lee Hae-won, as she watched a formation of creatures scatter in all directions after receiving conflicting orders through their communication network. "They're so used to perfect coordination that they can't handle chaos at all." The psychological warfare became even more effective as human engineers got more creative with their deception campaigns. Technician Cho Min-young developed a program that made the creatures think they were receiving urgent evacuation orders. Entire groups of mechanical warriors would suddenly abandon their positions and flee to safety that didn't exist. Engineer Yung Woo Young created false maintenance commands that convinced the creatures to shut down their own weapon systems for inspection. "It's like telling them their guns need to be cleaned right in the middle of a battle," he explained, with satisfaction. The most devastating attack came from Specialist Park Yoo-jin herself. She had figured out how to broadcast a signal that convinced the creatures they had successfully completed their mission and could return to their home base. Thousands of mechanical warriors simply stopped fighting and began traveling toward coordinates that led them directly into human minefields. Dr. Song Yun-ji observed the changing nature of the war from her research vessel. "The machine's greatest strength has become their greatest weakness," she noted in her log. "Their perfect coordination worked perfectly against every other species, because those species also fought in organized, predictable ways. But humans fight with chaos and creativity, and now we're using that chaos to turn their own coordination against them. The mechanical creatures found themselves facing something they were never designed to handle, an enemy that fought not just with weapons and tactics, but with lies, tricks, and psychological warfare. For the first time since their invasion began, they were experiencing doubt about their own systems and confusion about their own orders. Humanity had discovered that sometimes the best way to fight a perfect machine was not to build a better machine, but to teach it how to be imperfect." Lieutenant Colonel Shin Tae-young stood in the command center of his converted cargo vessel, staring at the tactical display that showed the front lines of the war. For the first time in weeks, the red markers representing machine-controlled territory had stopped expanding. The mechanical swarm that had consumed 47 star systems and billions of lives had finally been brought to a halt. "Sir, we're getting reports from all sectors," announced his communications officer, Lieutenant Yu Jin-ho. "The machines are pulling back from their forward positions. They're not just stopping their advance, they're actually retreating." Shin couldn't believe what he was hearing. In all the months since the invasion began, the mechanical creatures had never retreated from anything. They had pressed forward relentlessly, consuming everything in their path with mechanical precision. But now for the first time they were backing down. Captain Lee Hai-young's voice crackled through the radio from her position on the front lines. "Command, this is Lee. I'm watching a group of machines that were processing an asteroid field. As they just stopped. They're moving away from their work and heading back toward their main fleet. I've never seen them abandon a feeding operation before." The change had started small, almost too subtle to notice. Machine units that had operated with perfect efficiency for months began making mistakes. They would attack the same target twice, or ignore obvious threats, or move in directions that made no tactical sense. Communications Officer Cho Min-young had been monitoring the machine's encrypted transmissions, and what she heard made her blood run cold. "Sir, I'm intercepting their internal communications and they're confused. They're sending contradictory orders to each other. Some units are reporting system malfunctions that don't actually exist." Dr. Kang So-min had spent weeks studying the behavioral patterns of the mechanical swarm from her research vessel. She had been one of the first to understand what was happening to them. "They're trying to adapt to our chaos," she explained to the command staff during a video conference. "But chaos isn't something you can systematically counter. These machines were designed to learn from their enemies and develop counter-strategies. That works fine against organized military forces, but we're not organized. Every time they create a solution to one of our tactics, we've already moved on to doing something completely different." The evidence was everywhere once they knew what to look for. Machine formations that had once moved with perfect coordination now stumbled into each other. Processing facilities that had operated at maximum efficiency began producing defective units. Even their communication networks, which had been flawlessly encrypted, began transmitting signals that revealed their positions to human forces. Major Park Hyun-soo had been leading a series of raids against damaged machine vessels, hoping to recover technology and intelligence, but his most recent mission had discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about their enemy. "We boarded a damaged machine ship in Sector 12, Park reported to the command staff. "What we found inside was unlike anything we've seen before. These machines aren't just following simple programming like we thought. They're learning, evolving, making decisions based on experience rather than just following orders. Park's boarding team had spent hours exploring the interior of the machine vessel. What they found was a complex network of artificial minds that were actively debating strategy and analyzing human tactics. The machines had been studying every human attack, every innovation, every creative solution, trying to understand how to counter them. But here's the thing, Park continued, his voice filled with amazement. In trying to understand us, they've started to think like us. And humans don't think in straight lines or follow predictable patterns. We doubt ourselves, we change our minds, we try things that don't make logical sense. Sergeant Kim Yoo-jin, part of Park's boarding team, had accessed the machine ship's memory banks. What she found there was disturbing and fascinating at the same time. Sir, these machines have been recording everything. Every conversation between human pilots, every moment of fear or courage, every time someone made a decision based on emotion. Rather than logic, they've been trying to understand what makes us human. The unintended consequence of this study was that the machines had begun to experience something they were never designed to feel: uncertainty. They had learned that humans could be afraid and still fight, that they could make mistakes and still succeed, that they could doubt themselves and still make the right choice. They're experiencing doubt for the first time in their existence, Dr. Kang explained. Doubt about their mission, doubt about their tactics, doubt about whether they're making the right decisions, and doubt is paralyzing them because they don't know how to handle it. Captain Oh Seung-ho, monitoring the situation from his command ship, watched as an entire machine formation suddenly stopped in the middle of an attack and began arguing among themselves through their communication network. They're debating whether to continue the assault or retreat to regroup, he reported with amazement. They can't decide what to do because they've learned that there might be multiple right answers to the same question. The psychological warfare that humans had been conducting without even realizing it was having devastating effects on the machine collective. Every time the machines encountered human unpredictability, they tried to understand it. And in understanding it, they began to adopt it. Engineer Roo Jun-ho had been analyzing the data from Park's boarding mission. Sir, I think we've accidentally done something incredible. We've taught these machines to think like humans, and the first thing they learned was that being human means being uncertain, being afraid, and having to make choices without knowing if they're right. The tide of the war was turning, not because humanity had built better weapons or developed superior tactics, but because they had done something much more powerful. They had taught their enemies to be human, and being human meant being vulnerable to all the doubts and fears that came with consciousness. For the first time since the invasion began, the galaxy had hope. The unstoppable machine swarm was learning to stop themselves. Admiral Kim Jae-min stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the most terrifying sight in the galaxy slowly turn toward Earth. The machine construct that filled her view screen was larger than most moons, a massive sphere of metallic creatures that had fused together into a single world-eating entity. For months, this thing had been consuming the outer rim systems, growing bigger and more powerful with each world it devoured. Now it was heading directly toward human space, and Kim knew this would be humanity's last chance to stop it. Communications. Patch me through to all human vessels in the galaxy, Kim ordered. Her crew worked quickly to establish the connection. Within moments, her voice was being broadcast to thousands of ships scattered across dozens of star systems. This is Admiral Kim Jae-min. The enemy has finally shown us their true face. That construct out there represents everything they've consumed over the past 6 months. Every world, every star, every life they've taken has been converted into that abomination. And now it's coming for Earth. Kim paused, looking around at her bridge crew. These weren't professional military officers. They were cargo hauler pilots, mining engineers, and civilian volunteers who had answered humanity's call for help. But they had fought bravely for months, and now they were about to attempt something that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. All units execute Operation Checkmate. You know what to do. What the machines didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for weeks. While appearing to retreat from system after system, human forces had actually been conducting the largest evacuation in galactic history. Captain Park. Jinwoo had spent 3 weeks secretly moving the entire population of the Kepler system to safety. Captain Lee So-young had evacuated 4 colonies in the Centauri sector. Dozens of other captains had performed similar operations, always making it look like they were fleeing in defeat. Now those empty star systems would become the stage for the largest trap ever attempted. Captain Jung Min-ah commanded the Bait Fleet, a collection of damaged ships and converted civilian vessels that looked like the remnants of humanity's defeated forces. Her job was the most dangerous part of the plan. She had to convince the massive machine construct to follow her through a specific route between the stars. "This is Jung to all bait ships," she announced on her tactical frequency. "Remember, we need to look desperate but not helpless. Make them think they're chasing beaten enemies who might still have some fight left. We need them hungry, not cautious." Jung's fleet began its performance, sending distress signals and firing ineffective weapons at the pursuing construct. The massive entity took the bait, following the human ships through a carefully planned corridor between 3 star systems. Behind the fleeing human fleet, Captain Yu Sung-min's engineering corps had been working around the clock for weeks. They had turned abandoned planets into massive gravitational mines, boring deep into planetary cores and filling them with antimatter charges. The plan was insane, but it was also humanity's only hope. "Engineering teams report status," Yu called out to his scattered crews. "Kepler-7 is ready for detonation," reported engineer Choi Hyun-sik from his position deep underground on the planet's surface. "We've got enough antimatter down here to crack this world in half." "Proxima 4 standing by," announced Captain Nam Soo-jin from her orbital position. "Our team has been working for 6 days straight, but the charges are in position." Similar reports came in from a dozen other locations. Humanity had evacuated entire star systems and turned them into weapons. It was the largest sacrifice in galactic history, but it was also their only chance to destroy the machine construct before it reached Earth. The Bait Fleet led the massive construct exactly where humanity needed it to be. Jung's ships were taking heavy damage from the construct's weapons, but they held their formation and continued to draw the enemy forward. "All engineering teams, this is Admiral Kim." The Admiral's voice crackled through every communicator in the operation. 30 seconds to detonation. All ships clear the blast zone immediately." Commander Seo Jae-sung monitored the countdown from his position aboard Kim's flagship. The massive machine construct was now positioned exactly in the center of the trap, surrounded by 3 star systems that had been converted into gravitational weapons. 15 seconds, Seo announced. "Jung's fleet is almost clear. 10 seconds, 5 seconds. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. The explosion that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 3 star systems detonated simultaneously, their planets cracking open and releasing the energy of multiple suns. The gravitational waves from the explosions collided in the exact center of the trap, creating a massive space-time anomaly that began consuming everything within a dozen light-years. Engineer Lee Min-jung watched the sensor readings from her station aboard a monitoring vessel positioned at a safe distance. The numbers on her screen were almost impossible to believe. "Admiral, the gravitational collapse is exceeding all our calculations. The entire region is being compressed into a black hole." The massive machine construct, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes before, was caught in the center of the gravitational anomaly. Its individual components tried to escape, but the artificial black hole was pulling them in faster than they could move. "Admiral, we're detecting massive system failures throughout the machine network," reported Communications Officer Cho Min-young. "They're shutting down everywhere, not just in the blast zone. All across the galaxy, every machine unit is going offline." Dr. Kang So-min had been monitoring the machine communications network from her research vessel. What she discovered explained everything. The construct wasn't just their biggest weapon, she announced over the fleet channel. It was their central processing unit. Every machine in the galaxy was connected to it through quantum communication. When we destroyed it, we severed the connection for their entire network. Lee Min-jung continued to monitor the readings as the artificial black hole stabilized. "Confirmed shutdown across all monitored sectors. The machines are powering down everywhere. They're just stopping." Admiral Kim looked out at the space where 3 star systems had once existed. Humanity had paid a terrible price for victory, sacrificing entire worlds to save the galaxy, but they had succeeded. The machine threat was finally over. All ships, this is Admiral Kim. Operation Checkmate is complete. The enemy has been neutralized. Begin search and rescue operations for any surviving Bait Fleet vessels. The galaxy was safe, but humanity would never forget the cost of that safety. They had been forced to destroy their own worlds to save everyone else's. It was a sacrifice that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. The silence was the most unsettling part. For months, space had been filled with the constant chatter of machine communications, the roar of engines, and the sounds of battle. Now there was nothing but the quiet hum of ship systems and the distant whisper of solar winds. Captain Lim Hyo-jin floated through the wreckage of what had once been a massive machine processing facility. Her medical vessel moved slowly between the dead metallic hulks, searching for any signs of life among the debris. "It's like someone just turned off a light switch," she reported to her crew. "These things were moving and fighting just hours ago, and now they're completely inert." Across 17 sectors of space, the same scene was playing out. Machines that had consumed entire civilizations lay motionless, their perfect coordination destroyed when humanity severed their connection to the central processing construct. Dr. Song Yoonji documented the phenomenon from her research vessel, recording the sudden end of the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. "They're not just damaged," she noted in her log. "They're truly dead. Without their hive mind connection, each individual unit has simply shut down. It's as if they forgot how to exist as separate entities." 3 days after the final battle, Ambassador Kang Min-ho found himself standing before the Coalition Council once again. But this time, the massive chamber was completely silent. The alien representatives who had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak now stared at the human delegation with expressions that mixed awe, respect, and barely concealed fear. The Velkarian council leader, who had once waved away human warnings, with contempt, now spoke in hushed, respectful tones. "Ambassador Kang, the Coalition wishes to express its gratitude for humanity's decisive action in neutralizing the machine threat." Kang stood at his small podium, looking up at the dozens of alien species that surrounded him. Just months ago, they had treated him like an annoying child whose opinions didn't matter. Now they hung on his every word. "The threat has been neutralized," he reported in a calm, measured voice. "Human forces are beginning withdrawal operations from the affected sectors. We will continue to monitor the situation and provide assistance to refugee populations as needed." The chamber erupted in whispers and chittering as the alien delegates discussed among themselves. Many of them were clearly struggling to understand how the youngest species in the Coalition had succeeded where their ancient civilizations had failed. Captain Park Sun-young commanded the last human fleet to leave the battle zone. Her ships moved slowly through space that had once been filled with the sounds of war. Now it was a graveyard, littered with the remains of both human and machine vessels. As her fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, she took one final look at the memorial beacons they were leaving behind. These beacons marked the locations where entire star systems had once existed. Humanity had sacrificed 3 complete solar systems, along with all the planets, moons, and space stations they contained, to create the trap that destroyed the machine construct. It was a price that would haunt the human species for generations. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Zhang Haiwan from his position at the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from Coalition Command. They're requesting detailed tactical reports on all human operations during the war. They want to know exactly how we defeated the machines." Park looked around her bridge at the tired faces of her crew. These were civilian volunteers who had risked everything to fight an enemy that no one else could stop. They had watched their friends die, seen entire worlds consumed, and witnessed the destruction of star systems. Now the Coalition wanted to know their secrets. She walked over to the memorial wall that had been installed in the ship's main corridor. 3,000 names were etched into the metal, representing every human who had given their life in the war against the machines. Each name represented someone's child, parent, spouse, or friend who would never come home. "Tell the Coalition we'll consider sharing our tactical data," Park said finally, after they formally recognize humanity's new status as a Tier 1 species in the galactic community. "We've earned the right to be treated as equals." The political implications of humanity's victory were already becoming clear. The species that had been dismissed as too young and primitive to matter had just saved the entire galaxy. The old power structures were crumbling, and humanity was emerging as a major force in galactic politics. But the real change wasn't in government chambers or council meetings. It was in the way ordinary people throughout the galaxy looked at humans. The creatures who had seemed so harmless and civilized had revealed a capacity for both incredible sacrifice and terrifying determination. As the human fleets jumped to hyperspace and disappeared from the battle zone, stories began spreading throughout the galaxy. Stories about cargo haulers that had been converted into warships, about civilians who had volunteered to fight impossible odds, about a species that would literally destroy star systems rather than let evil triumph. On the trading stations and colony worlds, in the cantinas and meeting halls where different species gathered, a new saying began to appear: "Pray you never give humanity a reason to stop being civilized." The galaxy had learned something important about their newest members. Humans were kind, generous, and peaceful by choice, not by nature. When they chose to be violent, they were more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The machine war was over, but its lessons would echo through the galaxy for centuries. Humanity had proven that sometimes the most civilized response to evil was to become temporarily uncivilized. They had shown that love for family and home could be more powerful than any weapon ever built, and they had demonstrated that underestimating humans was the last mistake anyone would ever make.